I'm Pat Green, and tonight's forum is the third Bill Green program. This is a special evening for me and for my family. Closer? Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Because the Green Forum memorializes my late husband, Congressman Bill Green, and the issues that he cared about, which are also issues that I care about. Bill was a moderate Republican, or as he preferred to think of himself, a progressive Republican. Aside from today's meanings, the progressive term really goes back to Teddy Roosevelt, who was the first president who cared about environmental issues. Maybe not the way we think of them today, but for his days and times, it was something new. So the progressive tradition is a good one. There were a lot of issues that were important to Bill. Good affordable housing, the well-being of New York City and America's other cities, reproductive rights, civil rights and equal status for women, racial minorities, and gays and lesbians in our society, campaign finance reform, environmental issues, and that's just some of them. Bill's approach to advancing these issues was to form alliances and coalitions on both sides of the aisle. He placed a very high value on bipartisan support for initiatives, not just because it was necessary, although with the makeup of the Congress at the time he was there, it was absolutely necessary, but because he believed it was part of having good government, a government where rational debate took place on issues. And he believed that out of that kind of debate, rational solutions could come. And we've seen what a loss it is that that's not really happening today. Beyond Bill's work in Congress and his other public service, he was a philanthropic and civically engaged man. He served on the boards of many nonprofit organizations, including the Taconic Foundation, excuse me, which has funded tonight's program, and the New School and Milano, which have convened all the Bill Green forums so far, and I'm very grateful to both of them. During tonight's program, we'll be discussing a topic that's of urgent importance to our society, and one that I care very much about. It's the economic standing and the economic security of women in our society. Recently, I was talking about this issue with some of Bill's former staff members, and they reminded me that in the 1980s, Bill provided maternity leave and job share arrangements for his staff. And at that time, he was the only member of Congress providing such benefits. And he had one of the most efficient and effective offices on the Hill. So, if people will take a chance and do something new, they may find that they're doing something good, but it's also working very well for them. Bill was always ahead of his time. But today, with a willingness to look seriously at women's economic difficulties, especially low-earning women, and especially in hard times, we can surely do better than we're doing now. Before I introduce our next speaker, I want to thank the Taconic Foundation again for underwriting this important program and the New School for hosting it. And I do especially want to thank the New School's Louis Dorff for the enormous amount of work that he's put into organizing all of these programs. Thank you, Louis. And now I'll introduce our next speaker, Lisa Servan, the Dean of both Milano and the New School for General Studies. Her biography's in the program, so I won't go over her many, many professional accomplishments. But I will tell you that the first time I met Lisa was shortly after she began her deanship. And even at that early stage, she had a very ambitious agenda for making Milano an even better school and an even richer educational experience. In her relatively short time as dean, she's done a superb job. I've enjoyed getting to know her, I've enjoyed supporting her efforts, and I'm happy to call her a friend. Please join me in welcoming Lisa Servan to the podium.
Closer. Okay, thank you so much, Pat, for all that you do for Milano and our students. And I, too, am so proud to count you as a supporter and as a friend. Pat mentioned that this is the third time that we've done an event like this in honor of Bill, and she said, I think you guys are getting really good at this. So y'all are lucky if you haven't been to, the first two were good, but I think this one is going to be great. Pat mentioned that I'm the Dean of Milano and the New School for General Studies, and I started on the faculty here at Milano in 2001, so I've sort of was born and raised at Milano. I never did get a chance to meet Bill Green, but I've known about his service at Milano and the New School for many years since I came to the school. And as dean, I've been fortunate to benefit, even today, from the difference he made during his time. As a board member, he helped guide Milano and helped it flourish as a place that was known for civic engagement and academic excellence, and those are two values that we still really try to uphold today. Bill Green was also a very generous philanthropist, and his giving to Milano, the New School, and to other institutions was quite extraordinary. At Milano, Bill and Pat provided scholarship support that enabled us specifically to engage racial minorities as master's degree students. Thanks to them, about 100 Green scholars graduated over roughly a decade that started in the mid-1990s. And that contributed enormously to the diversity of Milano's student body and to the diversity of professional fields for which we train our students. And this is something our president, Bob Carey, says a lot about Milano, is that we're the most diverse unit at the New School, and we're one of the most diverse graduate schools I've ever been a part of. So I'm so pleased that Pat has continued to be involved and to provide scholarship support for Milano students. Her intellectual engagement has been tremendously important. Every year she spends time with the newest Green scholars, and she's been a partner in developing the Bill Green Forum since its inception 2 years ago. So it was her suggestion to invite Iracema Garza to join us tonight. I also want to next introduce the Green scholars in the room. I think at least some of them are here. Sere Betru, Liz Friedrich, Dwayne Tyndall, and Soledad Ursua. Please stand and be recognized. And I know you aren't the only alums here, right? Any other alums, just raise your hand so we can see you. It's really important that we keep bringing our students, our former students, back. Next, I'd like to thank the Taconic Foundation for underwriting this program. John Simon, the foundation's president, and Casey Burgess of JP Morgan's private bank, the Taconic Foundation's program officer, are here tonight. And so are some of the other members of the Bill Green Lecture Committee that helped us plan this series. Jim Carrolley, Boker Doyle, and Bob Larriman, and Veronica White, who spoke on last year's program. And next, let me thank a few more friends and supporters in the audience, Sherry Sandler and Mark Willis. I just saw Mark. Yeah, there he is. Will you please join me in giving all of them a round of applause? Thank you. So tonight's program is a collaboration between the Center for New York City Affairs at Milano, the Taconic Foundation, and the Bill Green Lecture Committee. It manifests the mission not only of the Taconic Foundation, but also of the center, which is to promote policy innovations that strengthen neighborhoods and reduce urban poverty. So this was a really good match for us. The center specializes on the issues of public education, child and family services, immigrants, urban politics, and strategies for building stronger communities. At Milano, we work very hard to bridge the gap between academic theory and practice. We like to say that we get our students out in the field on day 2 after we've given them the most rudimentary of tools. One of the ways that the New School ties theory and practice together is through the public policy forums put on by the Center for New York City Affairs. These forums bring together local leaders and innovators to create meaningful dialogue about the pressing policy issues confronting low-income families today. And we don't shy away from controversy. We really try to bring people who speak to all sides of an issue and really help our students and others in the audience develop their own viewpoints by listening to what people with many different perspectives have to say. With respect to tonight's issue, the October 2009 Shriver Report found that for the first time, women now account for fully half of America's workforce. That might be a statistic you haven't heard for a while. The one that I'm afraid that you have, and I'm sorry to report, is that women still only earn 77 cents for every dollar earned by a man, up a mere 13 cents from 1963. So tonight we'll be exploring the effect of the recession on women's equality in the workplace and what that means specifically for low-income working women. I'm happy to introduce former Congresswoman Sue Kelly, an advocate for women's rights who served in the House of Representatives from 1995 to 2007, representing New York's 19th District. During her tenure, Representative Kelly served on the Financial Services Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations, where she focused on corporate accountability. Her subcommittee conducted the first congressional hearings on the Enron and Global Crossing bankruptcies, as well as the WorldCom accounting fraud. Representative Kelly also co-authored the Transportation Equity Act for the 21st century, which brought more than $11 billion to New York for transit and highway improvements. She took a legislative interest in women's rights and backed legislation for cancer research and the prevention of domestic violence. She was the chief House sponsor of the Women's Health and Cancer Rights Act of 1998, and from 1999 to 2001, she served as the co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Women's Issues. Representative Kelly was also a personal friend of Bill Green, and it is my pleasure to welcome her here tonight. Please join me.
I hope you all can hear me. If you can't, raise your hand. This is the first day in the last 12 I've had a voice. But I'm really happy to be here. And I want to thank you, Dean Servan, and I want to thank the Taconic Foundation, and especially Pat Green, for your support of this forum. And I also want to thank Alec Hamilton. She's worked really hard to make this a success. I've been asked to talk a little bit about my friend Bill. Being a moderate in Congress is very hard. In 1994, when I was elected, there were 6 other Republican women in my group, 2 of whom didn't speak to me for the first 2 years we were there. It was because of my pro-choice stand. For 2 long years, I attempted to be friendly with these ladies, and they turned to me and acted like the equivalent of Sarah Jessica Parker finding a cockroach in her underwear drawer. Ew. You know, everybody knows that Congress has become increasingly polarized, but it's always been difficult to be a moderate on Capitol Hill. And Bill was a moderate. He always knew what a tough role that was. Politics in New York State is a blood sport. And that adds to the horror of running for office. Before I ran for Congress, I had never run for anything in my entire life. So after experiencing all the slings and arrows offered by my party, I wasn't sure how to react when I met Bill, and he actually offered to help. He was an incredible mind to tap, and I am eternally grateful. It was Bill alone from New York who reached out his hand to this poor neophyte and got me started in Congress. Bill understood 2 things. Moderates have to help moderates because no party functionary really understands them. And all women have a difficult time in Congress. You add to that difficulty being a Republican woman on Capitol Hill and a moderate, you're bound to have problems. On April 28th this year, the congressional newspaper Roll Call ran an article with the title, "Senate Women Trying to Break Up Old Boys Club." Senator Dianne Feinstein is quoted as saying, "I don't think men really recognize that they treat a woman differently." And that's exactly what made Bill Green different. He not only listened to women, but he valued what they were saying. Perhaps that was because of the remarkable woman that he was married to, maybe you think. Being a Republican moderate means that you're going to work with Democrats to craft and pass legislation that you feel is right for the country, and that forces you often into some pretty uncomfortable positions. A great example of this is Bill's strong support for the Equal Rights Amendment. Let me tell you what it's like to oppose your president on legislation. You're up there on Capitol Hill and you're doing what you think is the right thing for America, and you get the call. Come on down to the White House for a little chat. Well, you can hardly say no. I mean, he's your president and you're in the same party and all. So you go. And you sit in the West Wing in a waiting room. It's sort of like the dentist's office. Finally, you're ushered into the Oval Office, and there stands the big man himself, along with maybe the vice president and a couple of aides. The president smiles, social greetings all around, and then he explains that he wants your vote and why. If you don't commit very quickly, the talk gets quite tough. Now think about Bill Green sitting there on that couch with that terrible pressure from President Reagan, then going back up on Capitol Hill and voting against his president. That took backbone. That was Bill Green's commitment to equal rights. In all the years since the ERA began its sorry quest for passage, the general lot of most women in the United States still hasn't changed very much. As the dean pointed out, the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that on the average, today, U.S. women earn 77 cents for every dollar that men earn. Rumors of our progress have been greatly exaggerated is the title of Carolyn Maloney's book, and I think the title is right. Cultural changes are hard to achieve. They have been nearly impossible to change on Capitol Hill. Think about a lovely former congresswoman from Colorado, a Democrat woman named Pat Schroeder. For 40 years, the Democrat men ran Capitol Hill as their own private fiefdom. Pat was in Congress for 26 years. And had she been a man, she would have had some real power. But in all those years, Pat never had control of a full committee that had any consequence at all. I believe if she had been a man, she would have been right up there with the best of them. Let me tell you how the old boys club hit me. After my first term in Congress, I wanted very much to be on the Commerce Committee. It was the committee devoted to business matters and medical issues, and those were the things I'd spent my life doing, and I knew enough about them to offer some good legislation. At the time, there were no Republican women on the committee. My request was passed on to the then chairman of the full committee. His response? Like hell, I'll have some Northeast pro-choice moderate on my committee. 2 years later, an anti-choice conservative woman got a seat on his committee. Well, that's with Congress. But women get no help from the press either. When Nancy Pelosi took the speaker's gavel from whomever the GOP person was, did you see one of the lead articles about her on the front page of the New York Times? It began, well, she could hardly have worn red. Nothing about her mind, nothing about what it took for her to get that speaker's gavel. It was about her clothes. Jeanette Rankin, a Republican woman elected in 1917, she was the first woman elected to Congress. She suffered the same fate. Here's what they wrote about her. She strode down the aisle of the chamber in a well-made dark blue silk and chiffon suit with open neck and wide white crepe collar and cuffs. You see how long this has been going on? This kind of thought process regarding women? One day, in a speech on the floor of the House, Democrat Congressman Pete Stark said about Republican Congresswoman Nancy Johnson, who had just made a speech supporting a medical bill, well, everything she knows about medicine comes from pillow talk. Nancy's husband was a doctor. But what about her mind, Pete? Granted, there's now 16 women in the Fortune 500 who currently earn more than their male counterparts. But most of us will never be working for Fortune 500 companies. Most of us eke out our living doing whatever we can to pay the rent and get food on the table. And we're the ones earning 77 cents. Cokie Roberts wrote a book entitled, "We Are Our Mother's Daughters." But do we have to be? Couldn't we think about doing some things differently? Somewhere I heard the definition of being crazy is to keep doing the same thing over and over to try to correct the same problems. Don't you think that's worth thinking about? Think how long it has taken just to change some perception. You know how long? I love Queen Elizabeth I because it was she who stood against the philosopher John Knox back in 1559 when he issued his diatribe against women in power entitled "The First Blast of the Trumpet Against the Monstrous Regiment of Women." Here's a bit of it. For those of us who can deny it is repugnant to nature, for who can deny, but it is repugnant to nature that the weak, the sick, and impotent persons shall nourish and keep the whole strong? Impotent? That was his view of women. By the way, for your information, it's instructive to note that other parts of Knox's philosophy are deeply embedded in both the Republican and Democrat parties' philosophy today. I believe that we need to systematically redevelop our approaches to the problems of women. We know a lot of reasons why life is hard for most women. So what keeps us from getting ahead? I would submit to you, as I said before, cultural changes are hard to achieve. But until we change our approaches, I don't believe we really are going to change things. Legislatively, we need to stop thinking in terms of the politics of our problems and start thinking in terms of creating better policy. No party has a better grip on women's problems than the other party. It's the people and the policy that get the job done. That's what Bill Green was all about. It's the moderates like Bill Green that we need to put in Washington. People with backbone, but who understand and will work carefully with the other party to carefully craft new, better approaches to the issues. I'd also like to submit to you that legislation creating better controlled resource streams and creating more flexible laws would begin a process that would go a long way toward moving women's causes forward. We need to use new approaches, using different ideas than we've been using if we want to further the cause of women. Please, think about this. We need good minds, and we need new approaches. Had my friend Bill Green stayed in Congress, I believe he may have gotten a lot done. I miss Bill, but I'm joyful that he lives on in this forum. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Representative Kelly. It was wonderful. I'm Andrew White. I direct the Center for New York City Affairs, in addition to teaching politics at Milano. And I'm going to keep this very short so we can get to the panel. I just quickly wanted to sort of set up a little bit of a framework for the discussion. There is going to be time for your questions and comments as we get further into the time here. But to start getting down to the nuts and bolts of our topic tonight, in 1969, women made up only a third of the workforce in the United States. Women now, for the first time, make up half. Women are the primary breadwinners in a growing number of families. Nearly 4 in 10 mothers in the United States bring in the majority of their family's earnings. The recent recession accelerated these trends, interestingly enough. Since the end of 2007, there have been massive job losses, especially within traditional male-dominated areas, such as construction and manufacturing. According to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 3 out of every 4 jobs lost in this recession were held by men. So when we look at the numbers that show that women account for half of the workforce, we have to wonder, to what degree is this progress for women? You know, all the news is that half the workforce is now women, but part of that is the impact of this recession. As men lose their jobs and women keep theirs, is this reflective of gender equality or a lingering perception that women do more work for less pay? How much of it is a function of the places that working class and professional women hold in our economy, in healthcare, in education, and social services, sectors that have traditionally been less well paid, but are also less vulnerable to downswings in the economy, at least so far? There's also a very important racial and class component to this discussion. According to the Federal Department of Labor, African American women working full-time earned about 70% as much as all men, and Latinas earned 62.7% as much as all men. Low wages and less than steady full-time work combined to produce high rates of poverty in New York City families headed by employed single mothers. At the height of the economic expansion, 1/4 of New York City families headed by a working single mother still lived well below the federal poverty level. Even as more and more women entered the workforce in recent decades, policies created around work and home life balance have not kept pace with those changes. 40 years later, schools still let out in mid-afternoon. Employers often don't or can't grant flex time, childcare, medical leave, or paid family leave, operating as though the norm is still to have a full-time caregiver in the house. So today we intend to look at some of these policies a little more closely, take some of what Ms. Kelly said to heart about crafting new and better approaches to the issues and better resource streams, more flexible laws. I think that's a lot about what Milano is about and what the center is about. We're going to look at some of the short-term trends for women in the workforce in light of the economic downturn and what that means in terms of some of the longer-term gains for women. And we're going to hear about what the Obama administration is trying to do, hoping to do, or already doing. I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator, who's Valeria Fernandez. Valeria is an independent journalist based in Phoenix, Arizona. She's a reporter for our project at the center called Feet in Two Worlds, which you can find through our website, centernyc.org, or at news.feetintwoworlds.org. At that website, we publish every day stories about issues affecting immigrant communities in this country. Almost all of it is written by journalists from those communities and working in those communities. Valeria has a lengthy bio in the handout that you got at the beginning, so I won't go further than that. All that I can say is thank you for coming so far to do this. We really appreciate it. Valeria, and why don't the rest of the panelists come on up?
Thank you very much, Andrew. Let's introduce our distinguished participants today. And I will refer you to their bios in the program to read a little bit more. Joining us is former Congresswoman Sue Kelly, who just spoke. We also have here present Iracema Garza, who is the president of Legal Momentum, Mark Greenberg, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Policy Administration for Children and Families, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And we have Maggie Sepulveda, the instructor for non-traditional employment for women. It's called NEW, and she's a carpenter and a member of the New York City Brotherhood of Carpenters. And we're missing Paige Gardner? Okay, well, wonderful. We know that these are hard times. There are hard times for women, but women are jugglers, as we know, and we all juggle with many things. We're very different, but we all have to juggle with family, with work, taking care of the home, finding childcare for our children if we have them. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to identify some of these challenges on the ground faced by women today and live with some new approaches, like Ms. Kelly was proposing, some new approaches and some new ideas on how to talk about these issues and perhaps breach some of the gaps, the politics, that are really affecting people on the ground. One of the first questions I would like to ask for the panelists it's a general question, and I think any of you could feel free to answer. Perhaps Sepulveda, what do you think it has been the effect of the recession in equality in the workplace for women?
From my personal point of view, the recession has definitely hit construction as an industry as a whole. But as far as women go, I've actually seen more and more women throughout the years and recently come into the trades and into our peer apprenticeship program. And we're actually getting a lot more women out onto the field, even through the recession.
Do you think that in a way that has helped perhaps get women, in a non-traditional sector, are they getting paid more? Are we seeing changes in that?
I think one of the main reasons a lot of women are coming into construction throughout this recession is because we make the same dollar that our brothers do. We make the same benefits our brothers do. Same work, same pay. And I believe through this recession, that's something that's really important to women, is to get out there and make more money and make equal money and support their families. And being in construction, you definitely have that independence. We make enough money, our benefits are good enough, and we are able to support our families as individual women, as mothers.
I would like to ask Ms. Garza.
Sure. Well, what I was going to say is that this economic recession really just exacerbated a very bad situation that women were experiencing across the country. So, consider the fact that, wages are obviously, as Representative Kelly just mentioned, are not equal by any means. Also consider the fact that 70% of part-time, low-wage workers, part-time, are women. Those are jobs that don't have any benefits, that don't have any protection. So yes, we've got 50% of women in the workforce, and no, they are not in Forbes 500, Fortune 500. Yes, we have 50% of the graduating classes of law schools being women, but that's 2% of the female population. So the reality is, and I get this a lot about sort of the advances that women have made, no doubt about it. But in many cases, we're anomalies here, and that the rest, millions and millions of women have not been able to reach a point in their lives where they can adequately take care, support their family, and at the same time take care of the children. So, one of the things that I have a lot of problems with is this man session, that, yes, men lost the jobs that were actually where you can earn high-paying jobs. We have to remember that women didn't have those jobs. They were in retail, they were in service, so they were already doing quite poorly. I just want to add something that Maggie said. Listen, occupational segregation in this country continues to be probably one of the worst impediments for women achieving economic security. Consider that the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2007 reported that 50% of women, right, are clustered in 5% of job categories. So that gives you an idea of where the majority of women work, and those are not high-paying jobs. So just to get back to and we can discuss this more, but the reality is that times were already very, very difficult for women, and that this recession has exacerbated that. The one good thing that has taken place as a result of this recession is that those issues that have been plaguing women for a very long time, then all of a sudden came to the fore and to the public's attention, making it much easier to be able to advocate on their behalf and to talk about those particular issues. When the economy is good and you've got a segment of the population that is having trouble, our culture sort of dictates that people should just go out and get maybe another job, third job, everybody take care of themselves, and it's very difficult to advocate. So the only good thing about this recession is that now it's a little bit easier to talk about issues like temporary assistance for needy families, which I know my colleague will have a discussion about. So
I think, Ms. Kelly, perhaps you wanted to say something about the impact of the recession as you were listening.
I'll pass.
Okay. Well,
Actually, let me add just one additional
yeah,
point on that.
let's talk about
Sure.
some of the things the federal government is doing in that area.
And very happy to. But just on the sort of the overall context for it, I do think what's important to appreciate, as speakers have already indicated, the data does tell us that the majority of job loss during the recession has been among men. At the same time, the growth in unemployment has been very dramatic for women along with men. The women's unemployment essentially doubled during, as unemployment went up during the downturn. And if we were just looking at women's unemployment rate by itself, the level is unacceptably high under any circumstances.
Certainly, that's a very, very good point. And we're joined right now by Paige Gardner, and this is great timing.
Yeah.
Because I was dying to. We were talking about the effect of the recession on women in the workplace, and I think we need to think about also about a particular segment that's really affected by unemployment, which is unmarried women. And I'm sorry to cut you, but I think it's very fitting that perhaps you will want to talk a little bit about what we've seen, the experience of unmarried women in the recession.
Thank you, and thank you for including me, and apologies for being so late, but it's nothing like a train. So let's look at the issue of unmarried women in this country today. Unmarried women are now almost half of all women in this country. Their size have tripled since 1960. And what you see now is an incredible growth of these women in the workforce. But what is happening to them, as I was listening, is there is a differential unemployment rate by marital status. If you look at who is unemployed, overall, you look at women, unmarried women are much more unemployed than married women, and unmarried men, the same thing. So you look at the employment and you see unmarried men at the highest, unmarried women, married women, and then married men.
So
let me just catch my breath here.
Let's talk about policies related to that. I mean, what are some of the policies that, and any of you can feel free to talk about, that could help to fight economic inequality for women in general, but also for unmarried women? And should they be different? What differentiation should be made there, if any?
Well, I think that in terms of economic inequality, you look at these women, and they were the first to be really damaged by the subprime mortgage crisis. They were the first and the most impacted, if you think about women, about the predatory financial practices of credit cards. They make 57 cents to the dollar. So when you look at things like paycheck fairness is good for all women, and it's important to recognize this, but it is particularly impactful for these women. If you look at all the women in poverty in this country, 75% are unmarried. If you look at all the women who are unemployed in this country, 60% are unmarried. So there are big gender and marital status influences that are going on in this country. And we have to understand this. We have to understand that the family structure is very different. In fact, unmarried America is half of all America. So you see discriminatory healthcare practices in the workforce, retirement practices within the workforce that are particularly harmful to these women, in addition just to the fact that they're not getting paid as much and haven't been paid as much, if you think about it, since 1963 when the laws was changed. So when you look at America and you look at women, you really must understand the power of marital status in determining their economic status.
So you're talking about inequality in the workplace, discrimination. Tell me, what are some of the policies right now that are benefiting women? And perhaps also, Ms. Garza would like to answer that question. What's in place right now?
I mean, I think the question is, what should be in place?
Okay.
So, I mean, we've got, for example, Family Medical Leave Act, right? It's unfunded. We're the only industrialized country in the world that does not have a paid leave, maternity and otherwise. So, I mean, there's certainly a possibility there that it's a good piece of legislation that needs to be strengthened, and we need to start making, some inroads in that. And there was certainly have been some efforts on the part of some of the women's organizations to try to take the federal workforce, for example, and start there and start testing that, sort of give the business community an opportunity to get used to that particular idea. We take the stimulus package, for example, right? $250 billion went into trying to assist workers in construction and manufacturing. That's wonderful. The problem is there's not a whole lot of women there. So the question is, what sort of training dollars can then be allocated to women so that we can actually start opening doors for women in non-traditional employment, and they can have a shot at better economic opportunities. I mean, the list goes on, and then there's questions of enforcement. For example, the Office of Federal Contract Compliance is the agency within the Labor Department that is responsible for enforcing civil rights provisions, if you will, as it relates to companies with federal contracts. But the reality is that agency was pretty much decimated the last 8 years. And we know that without proper enforcement and without adequate resources for those particular agencies to do their jobs, it's just not happening. We have 2.7% women in construction today. 2.7. Back in 1978, right, we had come up with a goal, because we can't say affirmative action. The courts got rid of that. So these are these goals that the agency has, a 6.9%, all right? 40 years later, we can't even meet that, and we've got 2.7%, yet 50% of the workforce are women. So.
I want to make the point here that Ms. Garza talked about the stimulus package. The stimulus package was a great idea, but that goes back to the point when I spoke. The oversight of how the federal dollars are spent is missing.
Absolutely.
The attitude of people on Capitol Hill is, got a problem? Okay, we'll throw money at it. But there's no oversight. There's no one saying, you've got to be responsible. We're going to give you $1, we want $1 return. That's somebody's tax money. That's been a big problem all of Congress's life. There's a honeypot there, and they have a good time with it. We need to rethink how we allow our government officials on Capitol Hill to spend that money.
Mr. Greenberg.
Yeah. So let me say, as to the Recovery Act, first, that the Recovery Act itself has played a crucial role in the turnaround for this economy in the period since it's been enacted. It has made an enormous difference, both in terms of job creation and in terms of critical supports for people who are out of work. Just to highlight a couple of pieces which I think are particularly relevant in this discussion. Certainly, a major focus of the Recovery Act was around infrastructure spending and education spending and healthcare-related spending and generating of additional jobs. There was also the recognition of the crucial need to respond to the conditions of people who are unemployed. One particularly important aspect there, in addition to just the lengthening of unemployment insurance, the Recovery Act had a provision in it that spurred states, called the Unemployment Insurance Modernization Act, which spurred states to look at the rules of their unemployment insurance programs, which in many cases the rules had the effect of making it much more difficult for women and for other low-wage workers to receive unemployment insurance benefits. So it created incentive funding to encourage states to re-examine those rules, and there's been very dramatic improvements in a number of state programs as a result of it. The Recovery Act, I'd also highlight the importance of the increased childcare spending, the increase in Head Start, both of which, in addition to being valuable for children, are an important aspect of supporting the ability to go to work. I know we'll talk a little bit later about the TANF piece of it, which I'd also welcome talking about. And I do think on the accountability piece, necessarily on anything as large as this, it presents many accountability challenges. I would say that the efforts of the administration through the recovery.gov website and the reporting that it has required and the ongoing flow of information has really been seeking to make this as transparent a piece of legislation in its implementation, I think in a quite unprecedented way.
So I just want to add to that, because I absolutely agree that sort of, infusion, if you will, of stimulus money into the economy to be able to get communities back to work is absolutely necessary. It has had some impact on getting people back to work, et cetera. And in terms of the oversight, from my perspective, what I was thinking about is that if in fact you're adding $250 billion to construction projects, from my perspective, the oversight that I was looking for was sort of, equity in distributing those sorts of jobs that are being created. It's a very difficult situation, and one that I've discussed with the head of OFCCP, et cetera, about how is it that we can make sure that those billions of dollars that are getting to a construction site where the government has a contract with, that in fact women and other minorities that are traditionally excluded from these sorts of jobs are able to access them.
And I would like to know the answer to that question. Is there anything in place right now, or is there a commission? Is there anyone that's looking at that from Mr. Greenberg? I mean, based on what we're hearing here.
And I really can't speak to that directly,
Right.
but I am happy to do some follow-up and to get a follow-up response on that.
Okay. Well, when we're talking about all these policies, we can forget about the women that not only need to get back in the workforce, but when they do, they're faced with a constant challenge, especially when they have children, of how are they going to get childcare. And I mean, there was an incredible article in the New York Times, I think very complete, telling the story of this young woman, very, very troubling, downward spiral in which she found herself, and basically had to be on welfare in order to have access to childcare subsidies. And when states like Arizona and many others are cutting this, what can be done on the ground to help these women? Is there anything that...
I think what we're talking about really here is a cultural change, and something that Representative Kelly talked about. It has to be a priority for this country, right? That is our greatest resource. We as a country have to come up with a national policy to address this situation, and the reality is we don't have it. And yet 50% of the workforce are women. Women are the majority caretakers, and it's an issue. And no, we don't have a national policy. There may be some piecemeal programs, certainly TANF covers some of that, but we don't have, as a country, a national policy addressing this very critical issue.
So, and let me just add that the article that you're referring to, which I suspect many of you probably saw, a very powerful article in the New York Times describing some states where there have been reductions in the availability of child care assistance and what it has meant for families and situations in which individuals are forced to turn to welfare because they can better access child care by going through the welfare system. That is very much a result of not having sufficient child care funding in states to address the needs. One of the things which has happened in recent years is that at the federal level, the funding for child care has been fairly stagnant. There was a modest increase and then an increase in the Recovery Act, but overall, the funding has not been sufficient to be able to maintain even the numbers of children receiving assistance through the subsidy program several years ago. So the administration in this year's budget has called for Congress to add an additional $1.6 billion for child care. We very much hope that Congress is going to do that. What's happening in states, or at least in a number of states, is the enormous budget pressure that states are facing based upon their overall fiscal situation and the choices that get made when that happens. But ultimately, our view is that we do need an expanded federal commitment.
Please go ahead.
This has to be not only a cultural change, but a moral outcry. If you look at what's happening, and particularly, obviously, the women I am concerned about are women on their own. 1/5 of them are single moms. Half of the kids, half of the kids that are in households with single moms are in poverty today. They have increased food insecurity. So it's adequate child care, but there is a story where you connect the dots to child care, to insufficient help for single moms, to food insecurity, to for their children and their mothers, to homelessness, to being forced out of their homes, to being, the increased unemployment. So you have a story that is horrific when you think about the future of this country and you think about the investments we are making as a country into the future. And it's unacceptable.
So really, Paige, what you're talking about is that we don't have an adequate social safety net. That basically the social safety net that exists in this country was, as I'm sure Mark will talk about, altered in 1996, and now we have the temporary assistance for needy families. And that's probably one of our biggest social safety nets other than Social Security. Would you agree?
Well, at this point, and I think we'll be talking more about it, but I think at this point, the TANF program itself, for a number of reasons, serves a much smaller number of people than it did at earlier points. When we think about principal sources of support and principal sources of help for low-income individuals or families, the food stamp, what had been the food stamp program, now called supplemental nutrition assistance, is now a much, much larger program than TANF. The number of low-income families who are helped through the federal earned income tax credit is much larger than the number helped through TANF. So while we want to talk about TANF, it's just the reality is it's a much smaller group that is now in it.
No,
Part of the problem, I'm sorry, part of the problem, though, is writing legislation that is congruent with the mandates of our Constitution, that can provide flexibility Because when you get a woman who is, say, she's getting an education and she's going to get paid for doing a practicum. And if she gets paid for doing the practicum, she has to come off of welfare and she loses her child support. So, the child daycare. That's stupid. That's just a plain stupid way to write a law. But the problem is writing these things so they can get where they need to go. Women can get where they need to go. That's what I mean by cultural change. We have to change the minds of some of these people. And we also have to look at the Supreme Court and say, doggone it, give us a little leeway here. Because this isn't going to change. It's going to go on. It's always gone on. It's President Lincoln recognized it. So new thoughts and different ways of writing the law will help.
There was, of course, this report that I'm sure a lot of the people read here, the Shriver Report, that makes a series of recommendations. And I'll tell you, some of them talk about, updated basic labor standards to include family-friendly benefits. And I would like to know later on what you understand, all of you, about family-friendly benefits, because the concept of family, it's so diverse. Updating social insurance system to include paid family leave, which you were saying we don't have. Social security benefits that include the time that you spend caring for your child and also for an older relative. And more support for childcare and elder care. What's the response of the Obama administration at these policy suggestions and this idea of changing the culture and starting to talk differently?
Well, I can talk about several specific aspects of that. One is on the issue of paid leave. As I suspect many people here are aware, one of the proposals in this year's budget is for a paid leave fund. It would be a $50 million fund. It would be grants to states for the spurring of paid leave efforts in states. In addition to that, the administration is seeking in a number of ways to emphasize the importance of workplace flexibility. Right. It's been a significant priority for the Department of Labor. It is being emphasized in forums, in exchanges, in technical support, in communication outward, and certainly much of what needs to happen around promoting workplace flexibility is to have the emphasis on the importance of it and themes from leadership about the need to move forward.
Going back to the idea of family-friendly benefits, what does it mean for you, family-friendly benefits? Perhaps each of you would like to talk about that.
I think it's sort of what Mark was just talking about. I mean, certainly paid leave, paid sick days. The majority of workers in this country did not have one paid sick day. They don't have any protections if they decide that they have to take their kid to the doctor. They may lose their jobs. This is a reality for millions and millions of working people, including women. So that's certainly one. There is, as he said, a lot of work around workplace flexibility. In fact, the White House just hosted recently a forum to discuss workplace flexibility, and that's wonderful, giving parents an opportunity to be able to get these sorts of benefits, be able to leave work to take care of a kid, et cetera, all these things. The problem, of course, is that the economy being what it is right now, there's no jobs. And then there's the added sort of problem of how do we deal with like low-wage workers or, workers that are in jobs that, perhaps not in a big company that can sort of deal with more flexibility in the workplace, job sharing, part-time, 4 days, whatever, I don't know, what do you call it, this commuting, working from home, online.
Telecommuting.
Telecommuting. I knew there was a word for it. So that's really what I think about when I'm talking about work flexibility.
Ms. Gardner, will you like to answer that question from the knowledge that you have for unmarried women? Are there differences there, some things to consider?
I think one of the problems that we have as a country in terms of those who legislate is there is a view of who populates this country that is no longer accurate. If you think about the number of single women, never married, widowed, divorced, or separated, if you think about they're half of all women, if you think about half this country is unmarried, and if you're a single mom or a single dad, you have a different set of problems. You share many problems, but you have a different set of problems than those who, with a husband or wife, or those who are in relationships who are partners. So there is a new dynamic in this country going on, and you have to understand that, and you have to create policies that don't assume two parents in the household, and that's just fundamental.
I would like to ask Sepulveda, bring you back into the conversation. What is the role of the unions here? Because as the government is considering some of these policy changes, perhaps, what can unions do that has been successful?
I'm just here listening to what the other panelists are saying. I feel like I come from a completely different side of things. And as far as the whole stimulus package and everything you guys were talking about, I think it was a great idea, but I think the problem is that the unions really don't have many laws protecting us. And yeah, that stimulus money is out there, but it's not guaranteed that it's going to go towards union jobs. Non-union companies are definitely allowed to bid on everything we're allowed to bid on. And unfortunately, we're losing a lot of work towards non-union companies. And the way that affects us, especially as women and as minorities, non-union companies, for lack of a better term, construction is a man's world. It's a boys' club. And non-union companies do not have to hire women. They don't have to hire minorities. Whereas if you're a union contractor and you're federally funded, you do have to have a certain percentage of women and a certain percentage of minorities. So I think that, in a way, is kind of affecting us as females. And just to kind of go into the single mother issue, what I do see a lot on the field is a lot of women don't last because of childcare issues. I think they are the ones who need the money most, Not to say that a married man doesn't need to support his family, but for a single mother, it's more challenging for her. She's got to be into work. We start at 7 a.m. As a worker, you want to be there at 6:30. You want to be there early. You want to have a good impression on your boss each and every day, because the competition is out there. We're competing with each other. We're competing with the men. And I think it's definitely a challenge for single mothers who have to get their children to school. Daycare might not be open so early. And that's really a main issue that I'm seeing out there on the fields.
Maggie, don't union women have a little bit better time of it? Not necessarily in the construction trades, but because the unions train. They do train people to run the machines and to do the work. And that they do better, I think, than the people who are non-union doing similar types of jobs.
I definitely agree. I worked non-union for about a year before I got into the union, before I came through new. I was a student years ago, and now I'm an instructor there. But my non-union experience, I definitely learned a lot non-union, but my pay was little to none compared to the man next to me. You know what I mean? The union does train you. We do have an apprenticeship program, and you do learn the basics, but you mainly learn your trade on the field. So it's kind of like you're relying on your brother next to you to teach you what you need to learn. And like I said before, it is a boys' club, but there are a lot of men out there that are willing to teach women. They're actually accepting us in the industry. But we're still a drop in the bucket. I think in the Carpenters Union alone, we have almost a little bit over 500 women. But out of that 500, about 300 of them are still apprentices. So they're new women coming into the trades. And like I said before, we are seeing a lot more women come into the trades, but still in all, we're just a drop in the bucket.
That kind of goes to the issue that what family-friendly legislation means to me is helping the low-income women become better at their jobs. If they're better at their jobs and they get the education and training that they need to do that job really well, no employer is going to want to let them go.
Exactly.
So that's where I think the federal government has been very lax. They need to do that. That would help. And while they can push money out, they need to have oversight over some of these programs, so the programs don't spend money on fancy carpet and you can run a program out of a closet. I've done it. And it's you just need to have oversight over those dollars and make sure they go to the women.
Right.
I'm curious to know if you can share perhaps a story of success. I mean, you're also an instructor, and I wonder, these women that are trying to go to the non-traditional jobs, what's their background?
Oh, wow. I've seen women come from each and every background you can think of, from former police officers to former teachers to people working in the non-union sector. I mean, we see women coming from everywhere. But again, I think programs like new non-traditional employment for women, I think we need to have more of them out there, just to bring more women into the trades and to keep it going. Like, I have a lot of mentors in my union, women that I look up to that, I'm trying to follow in their paths. And I think my students that come behind me, I love seeing them get into the union and get their union card, and they come back up and they thank you. And for every one of us, hopefully there'll be 5 more coming behind us, But I definitely think funding is definitely important, and keeping these pre-apprenticeship programs out there.
Very interesting. Okay, first you and then you.
From my perspective, again, it's a question of occupational segregation. And so my organization, what we try to do is we work with tradeswomen, both with legal advocacy and et cetera, but working to make sure that they have access. And in that light, we have a great program for young women in New York City that are actually in the high schools. And so we start talking to younger women at a much earlier age, start recruiting and talking to them about the possibility of these jobs that are that pay higher wages, and we call it our pipeline project. And it's been very successful, and we have great success stories, because the reality is that women and girls can do this job. Women and girls are interested in better paying jobs. And, what they need is opportunity, and they need access. And then once they're in those jobs, we need enforcement on behalf of the federal government, state government, to make sure that they are protected. Because Maggie's being wonderful, but she also knows that there are horror stories for women in the trades, that they're not exactly welcomed with open arms. So
Yeah.
it's a challenge. It's part of the culture that we need to change.
It's definitely a challenge every day. Every day is a challenge. I mean, all eyes are on you as soon as you walk into the job site. Everyone knows that you're new on the job site, or some men are welcoming, some aren't. I could sit here all night and tell you guys horror stories or fights that I've personally had on the job and stuff like that. But, long term, it is definitely rewarding when you're able to drive over the bridge that you built or show off the building that you helped build. It's definitely rewarding, and it's a great career choice. At least for me, it was.
You were gonna say?
I would say one needs to look at this on a continuum. If you look at unmarried women, they have an 11% unemployment rate. So you start at that end of the continuum. What is it that they need? They need a lot of opportunity to not only get into jobs and not, low-paying jobs, but they need a lot more opportunity at college, at community college, and training. So you've got, and that commitment to training needs to go throughout. And then you have women who are making, are stuck in low-paying jobs and are making 57 cents to the dollar, and there needs to be a commitment to training them both on the job, but allowing them to advance themselves and advance their careers. And then you have women, many new women are now becoming their own business owners, and you see a disproportionate share of these unmarried women doing that. So what is it we need to support them and they're being able to be successful in that endeavor? So if you look at women across the board, I mean, it's true whether you're married or unmarried, you have this continuum of an investment This country needs to make an investment in the people who work. And if you look at the share of the workforce now and you look at the women in the workforce, there is a commitment that we need to make on an ongoing basis so they can add to the GDP, which is frankly, a very exciting thing to have happen.
And
So I wanted a
Yes.
question because, we're talking about unmarried women, and one of the things we really haven't been talking about really here is women of color.
Right.
Which is what I was
It's a big share of it.
Because I was going to say, what proportion of the people that you're talking about are actually women of color? Because, being unmarried, yes, but being Latina in this country or African American or, then there is an added challenge. And if you're an immigrant woman in this country, you're basically at the very bottom of the barrel, never mind that you're also contributing to the economy, to the GDP. So that's what I wanted to ask you about in terms of your data.
It's interesting, if, a majority are white, obviously, you've got about 19% but of color. But what happens is if you look at factors like unemployment, like wage discrimination, like healthcare, there is a marital status impact on all of it. So you can hold everything constant. And if you are unmarried, no matter whether you're color or white, you have less, you own less, and you make less, period. Because of the things that are going on now, that there are structural problems that we need to address at the workplace and in terms of some of the public policies that we have.
And what I was going to say is we haven't talked a lot about women of color or, for that fact, immigrant women. And I come from Arizona, and I'm sure you heard about the new law that we have down there. And
Just a little bit.
we have other policies, and they've been in place for many years. And one of the ones former Governor Gianna Napolitano signed is an employer sanctions law. And it actually has been used by some of the local authorities, like the sheriff, to arrest workers, among them many, many women, or their husbands, leaving sometimes U.S. citizens having to raise their own kids, having to go into welfare, and just this tsunami of problems. And I wanna ask Garza, what is your take on the impact that this law could have on immigrant workers, and it's not just an Arizona issue. Other states are wanting to do the same thing.
Well, it's, obviously in one word, devastating. Let's put aside this whole issue of comprehensive immigration reform and whether that happens or not. The reality is that we have X number of people here that are not documented. A large percentage of that are women. If we look at the immigration laws on their face, they appear to be gender neutral. They are not. There is a they seriously impact women. So Legal Momentum's had the last 10 years, we've been working on issues particularly as they relate to violence and immigrant women, because the Violence Against Women Act has certain provisions within the legislation that apply to immigrant women. And so we've been doing work from that perspective, and now we've been trying to expand our work, particularly because these are low-wage workers. These are the women that take care of our kids, that clean our houses, that do all of these things, and that allow the rest of us to go to work. So they do make a contribution to the economy. Many times they're in this country as a derivative status from their husband, so or a father or a male figure. So if that particular male figure happens to be documented, you can imagine the imbalance of power in that particular relationship. 40% of immigrant women in this country suffer from violence, either at work or at home. So if we take 1070 and let's just look, which is the name of the law that just passed in Arizona, just look at it very, very simply. If you now have the authority as a police officer to stop people and arrest them, et cetera, a woman who's being beaten at home, who's suffering from violence, abuse, in the workplace is not going to go to the police officer seeking help. It's just not. There are women in Arizona who are not going out to buy milk for their babies. They are staying home. They are keeping their children at home. This is a very serious situation, and so that's just sort of the tip of the iceberg. There's inequalities when we're talking about the fee structure to legalized status. I mean, it just goes on, because laws our immigration policies are basically created as if men are the only immigrants in this country. When take immigrants and expand it to people that have recently gotten status, 70% of people in this country who are immigrants are women and children. That's the face of an immigrant person in the United States today.
And I mean, in talking about that, not all of the people that you're mentioning are necessarily illegally here in the United States. And
No, most of them aren't.
I don't know, I really don't know this, maybe somebody can answer, but what's the situation when it comes to 10th benefits for someone that's a permanent legal resident? Well, we know that healthcare is not available.
You've got a 5-year wait.
What can you?
You've got a 5-year wait, which is, yeah.
Yeah, under the 1996 welfare law, with limited exceptions, legal immigrants aren't eligible for assistance during their first 5 years in the country. And then it's state discretion after that.
They use emergency rooms. And that is a part of the problem with the cost of health care.
So, yes, so you're here, you're a legal resident, you've done everything you're supposed to do, you're waiting to become a citizen, but if you're unemployed or hungry, too bad, you had to wait 5 years. This is one of the things that we were trying to get some relief during the Recovery Act, and certainly one of the policies that my organization is putting forth to the Congress to consider if in fact comprehensive immigration reform is ever going to be taken up by the legislature.
If you want to look at it maybe from not a social point of view, but economics, is it even, what are the costs of not covering these people?
I don't understand. What are the costs of not
Basically,
They're
where
huge.
does
They
it
are
come
huge.
back around to?
Think about the fact that this is just the driving up of the cost of health care alone.
Right.
But the lack of educating, the lack of support of these women means that they are not being able to give to their children. And that creates another class of person in the United States that is unserved.
Exactly.
And it just keeps going on.
Perpetuates. You know, and the other thing that immigrant women are having a tremendous time with, and one of the reasons they're going to go further underground in places like Arizona, is that if in fact they are arrested or detained, their children, almost in all cases, they will lose their children, particularly if those children are born in the United States. Courts around the country have been ruling that the best interest of a child is to remain in our wonderful foster care system. I'm not maligning the foster care system of the United States, instead of reuniting their children with their mother, even if it's in rural Guatemala or whatever. But, you know, we have filed a number of amicus briefs in some of these cases. In Nebraska, for example, there was a woman, an indigenous woman from Guatemala, who is deported, and she takes her child to the doctor, and they give her instructions in Spanish. She's, of course, indigenous, understands that she's to bring the child back only if the child is still feeling bad, when in fact they had said, bring the child back the next day or something. So they deport her, send her to Guatemala, and the lower court in Nebraska actually ruled exactly that it was in the best interest of the children to keep the kids in foster care in Nebraska, rather than allowing the children to, because they're United States citizens, rather than joining her back in Guatemala, where, yes, she was poor, but she loved her children, and there was all the things that the Constitution protects, every single one of us that are parents. It took 4 years for her to get her kids back because the Supreme Court of Nebraska finally saw the light. This is happening every single day in this country. They are losing their children.
I think we're getting closer to the time in which we're gonna open to questions. But before we go there, and you can start thinking about your questions, I would like to give you the opportunity. We need to leave here with a sense. I mean, we talk about so many issues and challenges in the policies. You talked about changing the culture. Where do we begin if we want to see change? Where do we start? Perhaps Congressman Kelly can suggest some strategies based on your experience with this issue. And I would like to hear from everyone in the panel.
I'd like to see us start using the laws we already have in place, re-examining those things that are supportive of women, and then making sure that, obviously, I sound like a broken record here, making sure that the money is being spent in the way that it should. We held hearings about whether or not the federal government should give money to school systems. When we held the hearings, we found out that the superintendent of schools in one Mississippi school district owned a new Mercedes every other year, and he was living in a $600,000 house. No, the money wasn't going to the kids. That's what I mean, folks, by oversight. It needs to go where it's supposed to go, and it's not going there. That's where I'd start.
I would say two things. I think, in a respectful disagreement, I think that there are stories like that that are horrific but become metaphors for problems that may or may not be as systemic as one would think that story says. But more importantly, I think what we can do is how do you create a dialogue and a narrative in this country, and we all need to do it, about how we are shortchanging our future. So you can talk about the various aspects of how we're shortchanging our future and create a dialogue around economics and around moral imperatives and around changing the culture. And then you have to elect people who understand that narrative.
You know, I absolutely agree with what you just said. I mean, because you may recall that, what was it, the welfare queens a few years ago? And so we used this metaphor of this woman receiving welfare, but actually was doing really well. And the reality is, and I hope that you're going to have an opportunity to really talk about how desperate the situation is for poor women. But one of the things that I go around, and I go to Washington a lot, and I get to meet with a lot of people, and I sound like a broken record, but one of the things that I think that we need to talk about as a country is that we can't look at it. I mean, I always talk about, all right, so if you don't want to look at participation of women in society as sort of a moral issue, if you don't want to look at it as a legal responsibility, that's fine. Then look at it as self-interest. Women are 50% of this country. They are no longer, their income is not a bonus to the family income. It is the family income. It is no longer a bonus to the U.S. economy. It is the U.S. economy. And if we're going to have a sustainable economic recovery in this country, I think it behooves us to make some very targeted and real investments in women instead of Band-Aid approaches to sort of deal with civil rights responsibilities. And that women have to be part of this overall formula to get the country back, to a place of prosperity, et cetera. And so that, from my perspective, I think that needs to be part of the conversation, that it's no longer just because it's a legal thing to do, the moral thing to do, but that we have a self-interest in this, just as we have a self-interest in making sure that we educate our kids, that they have adequate childcare, and that we cannot, as a country, afford 25% of our kids to live in poverty. We pay now, we pay later. That's a reality.
I would like, before you say something, to just let everybody know that we have some people with microphones in the back, and we're going to be preparing for questions in a little bit.
Sure. Thank you. So I'd first emphasize that just in a large number of the issues that we've talked about tonight, that the administration has taken steps and is taking steps. We are in enormously challenging economic times. The budget constraints are very real, but this is an administration that cares deeply about this set of issues and is seeking to move forward. We talked at several points about issues around TANF, the welfare program, and let me just say a word about that. The structure that came into place in 1996 that replaced the old system, during the 1990s when a number of things were going well in the economy, and when there had been a federal expansion of health care and child care and the earned income tax credit, and when states were being very energetic in welfare reform, there was a period where employment for single mothers was going up steadily every year, and where child poverty was falling every year. But over a 7-year period, it was a very striking progress. It was not perfect, but it was striking progress over that time. That progress largely stopped around 2000, and things had not improved since then in various ways, had gone backward going into this recession. In the recession before this one, the TANF structure was largely unresponsive. Even though unemployment was going up, the number of families getting help was going down. And in the Recovery Act this time, Congress created a fund called the Emergency Contingency Fund that was available to states, and it essentially said you can use this money to either expand assistance, to expand short-term help, or to create subsidized jobs. And what we've seen over the last couple of years is that for the first time in the history of the program, and it's still small, but the number of families receiving assistance has gone up. And the goal isn't just that the number go up, but the goal is that the program should be responsive to families in need. At the same time, we are also very encouraged. There are now 31 states that have begun operating subsidized jobs programs for low-income families using this fund. We are very encouraged by that as a development, so there's a lot still to be done, but we think it's important that it be a responsive program, one that connects people with work, and one that helps them build their skills and be able to enter into jobs to support families.
What is the percentage of women on TANF?
It is, the overwhelming majority of families receiving assistance are headed by single mothers.
Right.
Just important.
I'll just keep it short and sweet, I guess. As far as where I come from, I definitely like to see programs like NEW continue and grow. NEW's been around for about 20-something years now, I think, and I'd just like to see programs like that. And I'd also like to see some kind of laws go into effect where we protect the union worker, not only in construction, but unions, period. I think unions as a whole are slowly just falling apart, and if we bring them back up, I think in turn we will empower more women and more minorities. That's it.
Thank you very much. And do we have questions over there?
Yeah, so I agree. I think it's terrific that women do non-traditional employment. I think a lot of people here, we're doing non-traditional employment. But I'm overwhelmed by the number of women who stay in traditional women's roles and men who stay in traditional men's roles. And it just seems to me that if we don't value what women do and pay those jobs real wages that compete with what men's jobs are, we're never going to be able to solve this. Because one of the things when I've looked at some of this over the years is that if you want to drive down wages, put a lot of women into that job. If you want to drive up wages, have men start going into the job. So nursing went up in value when men started becoming nurses. And as women became lawyers, lawyers' salaries went down. So you can see this all over the place. We get paid based on the fact that we're women, and that's what those positions get paid. So I'd like to see what we can do to address that.
The question is, what will you do to address that?
Paycheck fairness.
I mean, yeah. It is an issue. It goes back to we need to sort of change our culture, and you're absolutely right. And that getting more women into non-traditional jobs is one of the easiest ways to create paths and opportunity to get them there. And I don't know that we have to worry about so many women getting into non-trad jobs, given the situation right now, that it would, lower wages. But I absolutely agree with your concept, so.
Do we have a question over here?
Yes, I'm a retired psychiatric social worker who actually trained and taught social work students and worked in low-income neighborhoods. Most of my clients were single parents in the projects. But on a larger issue, I've been a peace activist since high school, and I'm part of the Granny Peace Brigade and the Raging Grannies. And we have to figure out how we're using our money. As long as we let, and I'm not anti-man at all, as long as we let men decide that bombs, $1 trillion for the war, $33 billion coming up in the new appropriation, as long as we decide that security is bombs and not food for our children and not schools for our children and not money for parents, we're never going to change it. Our money is there. It's being used for destruction and not for anything that helps families. And until we get, men and women saying our children deserve to live well, instead of bombing other people's children all over the world, we're not going to have the money for what we need to do.
Would you like to ask a question on that?
Yes, I'd like an answer of how we can activate, not only women, but men to decide that children's lives are more important than a bomb that's going to, or a tank that's going to be used in Iraq or Afghanistan.
Thank you.
We need to teach our sons to be sensitive.
Good answer. We have, I think, a question from, was a gentleman from the back, or over there, and then you can go.
Thank you very much. My name is Ed Wesley. I'm from the Queens Civic Congress. I wanted to get to this cultural change that 4 out of 5 of the panelists have suggested. I was a little surprised at kind of the throwaway line when it came to measuring women's performance in the workforce. My experience has been quite the same as the pay scale. They have to perform 120% of the man that performs at 80% of the job to be treated on an equal basis. But my real question is, that's a comment, but my question is, where does the leadership come from to provide this cultural change? Is it the 16 CEOs that are part of the CEO Club for Women? Is it the president? Where does it come from?
Thank you.
You've done the studies. Well, I think that, Ed, this is a very, it's an interesting question, because I think that at some point, cultural change comes from the recognition that if you don't affect it, the cost is higher than not. And I think your comment about the number of women in the workforce, I think the understanding about particularly single women being completely shortchanged in this economy, but being, a huge consumer of the new homes. Anyway, the cultural change comes from, in some ways, I think, economic necessity, but also realizing and being willing to realize that the nature of this, the nature of who populates America is fundamentally different now. And if you don't start there, you cannot get, in terms of elite opinion, you cannot get to where you need to go.
I think there's a lot of things that can go into that. Me being sort of the political junkie that I am, would argue that we need to elect more women to Congress, and we need to elect more women, to places where policy is made, and when we can move some of these issues. And I'm not saying that that's all of it, but I just think that needs to be part of the formula.
But there needs to be a balance in the election of women to Congress. There's 21 Republican women and about 96 Democrat women.
Right.
We need more Republican women in Congress. They'll speak up.
Yeah, we need women. We need lots of women in Congress.
Bravo. So, do we have somebody over there with a question?
Hi, my name is Magali Giraud, and I represent Global Action on Aging. And I had the question about older women. Older women are part of the women that are facing discrimination. Unfortunately, in the statistics, a lot of them are single, a lot of them are unemployed, or a lot of them also have low wages. So I just want for the panel to address the issue of older women and how they face the discrimination of being a woman and also being old and age discrimination.
If you look at older women, one of the things that you see is the reverberating problems with earning, particularly if you're single, of earning 57 cents to the dollar, and also having retirement, harder issues around retirement in the workplace. So you start with a woman who's making 57 cents to the dollar. She has less of an ability to save for her retirement, and this impacts her as she ages throughout her entire life. So that's a huge issue for these women, and in terms of their workplace benefits, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what you're seeing, oddly enough, is in 1960, as a percentage of unmarried women, older women were a higher percentage in 1960 than they are now.
Well, I mean, I think it's the obvious. Older women in this country are more likely to be poor than older men. And it's a consequence of all these sort of factors that take place throughout her life. And that's a fact.
They're not only poor, they don't get jobs.
It's true.
Try finding a job if you're
Yes,
50
that's
years
true.
old and a woman. Not easy.
Yeah, that even goes for my industry. The older women I see come in, they'll unfortunately be the first ones to get laid off as opposed to a younger woman.
So it's age discrimination.
Yeah, I think it definitely has to do with age discrimination because from what I've seen from my experience, they can do the same thing I'm doing.
In
for
some
the
kind
most
of,
part, sometimes.
I can help but
Depends.
think
Depends what we're
about,
lifting.
in some countries, I mean, it starts when the women are 35 years old. I was in Uruguay recently, and I saw a little ad outside a window in a bakery, and it said, "Women, beautiful and under 30." I wanted to take a picture of it. And the craziest thing about it, I just wanted to insert this little anecdote, is that when I shared the story with my women friend from Uruguay, they didn't see anything wrong with it.
No, those are the common ads in Latin America. To get.
I think we have a question over there.
Yes, hi. I'm a graduate student from Milano, the New School for Nonprofit Management. And I'm wondering, my question is, do you think we have to restructure our taxes, especially when it comes to specifically married women and how we have like a tax incentive for married couples? And I think that has sort of an adverse effect on unmarried women, especially when it comes to the job market and et cetera.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
All right. We have another question. Where's the microphone? Over there, and then we're going to have someone, I see him there, and then over here.
Hi, my name is Sadam from the Drum Major Institute for Public Policy. And I just wanted to highlight the role of unions. We talked a lot about women in non-traditional occupations, and I've thought a lot about why women in traditional occupations don't unionize, aren't organized, domestic workers, even prostitutes, a lot of occupations. And I wanted to ask you, Sepulveda, is that how you pronounce your name?
Maggie.
What your experience has been in the union in terms of gender dynamics, if you've experienced discrimination, and if you see an opportunity for women to have leadership in unions so that we can begin to organize women in traditional occupations.
Yeah, there's definitely discrimination. You experience discrimination every day on a job site, just being a female, regardless of your age, your color. Just the fact that you're a woman, we experience discrimination. It's a constant challenge, but there are women who have come before me in my unions. We have one female, Ellie Spicer, who sits on our labor management. She's one of the first females to get a high position like that. We also have Tammy Rivera, who's our first female organizer ever in New York City. We also have one female, unfortunately only one female full-time instructor at our district council. This has all happened with the exception of Ellie, who sits in labor management. The other two positions have just come up the past couple of years. And I think it's extremely important that we keep women in those positions, and we definitely get more instructors at our school and more foremans and stuff like that on the field, because the future coming behind us, the apprentices and all that, I think it's important that they see a female teaching them, or they'll have a female foreman out there who's actually giving them their paycheck. Because for them to see that, it just kind of lets them know that we are here and we're here to stay and we're not going anywhere. And I think just by making moves like that in our union as a whole is definitely important. Getting more female organizers, more female instructors, just more females out there, period. The face of our union used to be all men. Now when you see advertisements for our union, you'll see one female out of the three. So you might see two guys and one female, which I think is just important to put a female's face out there.
You know, I think from like sort of just a theoretical concept, unions are really important. I mean, I worked for them for many years, and certainly they offer women a lot more protection, not just in the trades, but across, because you've got collective bargaining agreement that, you know, then better wages, benefits, et cetera. Absolutely no doubt about it. From the union's perspective, they haven't really caught up to all of this stuff, you know, from within the institution, I can say. But I'll tell you that in organizing drives, when there are, first of all, women or the majority of workers that are joining unions, makes sense, right? Because you've got more protections. Moreover, when you've got women organizers, your chances of winning a particular union election, it's not an easy thing to do, substantially increase, like 50%. If the woman is a woman of color in an all-female unit that you're trying to organize, then that percentage goes up to like 81% chances of organizing that particular unit. I mean, so unions do make sense for women, and they make better sense when you've got women in leadership positions that can assist other women coming in.
Okay. I think definitely an importance of the union, especially for construction, or at least for carpenters, is that we do have the support of our sisters around us. We have a women's committee. We have a steering committee, which I sit on. And I think just holding our meetings and being able to talk and relate to other females in the trade that do the same thing you do is important, and that support definitely helps. You know, there's been times where I myself have wanted to quit for whatever reasons, and I can turn to one of my sisters who are in the trades with me, and they can definitely relate to me and just help bring you back up. And I think that's one thing that, unfortunately, non-union spectrum does not see any of.
I'd like to, you know, I think this conversation is interesting, and the business about low wages and, you know, women being in non-traditional jobs. One of the things you've seen in this country is the growth of, you know, the loss of certain industries and the growth of the service sector writ large. And those jobs traditionally have been lower wage and not union. And unions have traditionally been obviously a pathway in the past to the middle class. But you have this enormous growth in the service industry, which is very important to the economic health of the country, and yet it has, it's not as, you know, the wages aren't as high, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got this problem of this growing piece of the pie in terms of an industry base with a lower wage base and more non-union, and many of which, you know, and women are disproportionately in some ways represented in some of those service sector jobs. So it's an interesting problem that we have in terms of the economic health and the economic growth of our country.
I think we have two more questions. One question over there, and there was one gentleman over here.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for the excellent presentation of all the panelists. My name is Kisia Gonzalez. I represent myself. I came from this Henry George School of Social Science, and my question is this. I heard you all mentioning change of culture, and in my mind is this puzzle. What culture are we going to change? The subdivision of the counterpart of the human race, which are the women, but I heard here talking about women of color, poor Latino, and subclasses of one only class of individual, human race. So there is what kind then of culture we're going to change, or is we referring to a change in policies that recognize the human rights of that other part of human race?
No, thank you.
I don't know how to answer that.
No, no comment. All right. No comment. I think you make a very good point. We have a question. Do you still want to ask a question over there? I saw your hand earlier.
Just a provocative remark about the
Provocative, okay.
Because Representative Kelly says always, take the men out and put the women into Congress, and that's going to change everything for the better. Of course, Bill Green's successor in Congress was a woman. And although I do vote on analyses of Congress, I don't think it was a benefit to any of the clauses for which we're talking about today that he was so defeated and represented by a woman. The broad brush, is not a good
Broad brush, so to speak.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
we have somebody that's been waiting for a while over there, the gentleman in blue.
No.
Okay, and
I
then we'll
enjoy
take
this
one last
presentation. Okay. There's a saying that goes, there are lies, there are damn lies, and then there's statistics. Unlike you, I don't pay too much attention to statistics provided by the government-controlled Bureau of Labor. However, you do. You look in the minutiae of the statistics, and you find all kinds of problems related to women in the workplace. Fine. Your solution, however, is to look for government for funding to solve all these problems. Unfortunately, the government is the problem. They'll throw money at it willingly, and Ms. Kelly says there's no oversight. And I think Ms. Kelly would also say that all these programs are unconstitutional, and that nowhere in the Constitution does it authorize Congress shall have the power to do any of this.
Excuse me.
Okay, right. Okay, let me get to the point. Okay. Now,
The question.
when I'm listening to you, I get the feeling that you're just rearranging the seats and the deck chairs on the Titanic, because the government is profoundly in debt, trillions and trillions of dollars.
Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to ask the question.
Page that we're shortchanging our future. You keep doing that, they will this country will collapse. We'll have hyperinflation, and then whether women be in the workplace or not, it doesn't matter because their money's worth nothing, and
All
you
right.
will have no future. So
Okay.
look for
so-
something else.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that there's a lady over there on the other side that
Yeah,
has
I
a
just
question.
wanted to ask, on the issue of workplace flexibility, I mean, you mentioned the paid sick leave and the paid medical leave, but other than those, what are some specific programs and policies that could benefit low-wage women? Because I think in the popular media and consciousness, a lot of times when they talk about part-time employment or flexible employment, the image is usually, higher wage professional woman. So how does that actually work with a lower wage woman where you're already at the poverty level? To work part-time means to be at extreme poverty, basically. Are there specific ideas and programs that have been proposed?
No, it's a challenge, and no, it's not that I know of, unless you do, that's specific to low-wage workers. I mean, obviously, the Secretary of Labor, and I just want to say one thing. We've been talking about the administration, and my job is to advocate on behalf of women, and sometimes go push buttons where I have to, because otherwise I'm not an advocate, then I'm advocating for status quo. But I just want to say that this administration has really been incredibly open, and we can at least go and have these discussions and set problems on the table and try to solve them. So I just wanted to go on the record to say that.
I think workplace flexibility, though, is different from part-time. I mean, and that's a
right.
very important point.
That's an important point. But it is difficult, I think, what she's saying, because if you're in a low-wage employment, and then you flexibility, meaning either you can leave earlier, you can do, be able to pick up your children, et cetera, it really doesn't help necessarily your bottom line. And it is a lot more difficult for women that are in low-wage work to take advantage of flexibility policies. What we need is better wages. We need living wages for.
Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I would like to thank all the panelists and invite them to have one final word. If there's anything else you would like to say or address.
I just want to thank Pat Green. I want to thank the new school. I want to thank all of you for really giving us an opportunity as an advocate on behalf of women. It's not easy to always have forums to talk about this very, very important issue. So I thank you very much. And certainly the foundation and the school. And so from my perspective, that's the last thing I want to say. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here.
Ditto.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, go ahead. No. And I also both want to join in the thanks and also to emphasize that, as I've mentioned in my earlier comments, these are issues that the administration cares very deeply about. I've heard a number of things tonight that are things that I will bring back and share with colleagues and will be the basis for additional discussion in the weeks and months to come. And I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, all of you, for participating.